Welcome to section 4-3 part 2, and in this video we're going to look at some of the homework problems in the second half of section 3. And in order to do this, we're going to need to use our trig identities, and these are ones that you should have gotten from the notes that you took in class, or maybe you're seeing it for the first time now, but this will be on your trig identity sheet, and some definitions that you need to know. That tangent is equal to the sine over cosine, and cotangent is the inverse of that. And these reciprocal identities, that cosecant is the inverse of sine, and secant is the inverse of cosecant, and cotangent is the inverse of tangent. And more importantly, these Pythagorean identities. This basically is based off of the unit circle and the triangles that ensue from the unit circle and using the Pythagorean theorem, hence the Pythagorean identities. When you have sine squared of an angle plus cosine squared of an angle, that's equal to 1. Now, keep in mind, this is meaning sine of an angle. Take an angle, put it into the sine function, it spits out a ratio, square that ratio, and then you're adding it to the square of the ratio of cosine. That's always and forever going to equal 1. Well, the same thing happens with tangent squared plus 1 is going to equal secant squared, and then 1 plus cotangent squared is going to equal cosecant squared of an angle. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the assignments we have here. Starting off with, on page 308, this section from 17 through 26, we're completing a table and we're given an angle. So let's just take a look at, say, number 19. Okay, number 19, we have the function tangent, and we're told that we want what's the angle in degrees, what's the angle in radians, and what's the value of the function. So meaning, what's the value of tangent theta? Well, we're given in number 19 that we have pi over 3. Okay, so our angle is pi over 3 in radians. Well, what is that in degrees? Well, pi over 3 in degrees is we multiply by 180 over pi, and that gives us 60 degrees. So we want to know, what is tangent of pi over 3? Well, we can use our values. Remember, tangent is going to equal sine theta over cosine theta. Okay, so the question is, what's sine of pi over 3? What is cosine of pi over 3? And so if we remember from our table, we can make a table of all of our values, so on and so forth. Well, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, that's the one we want. Well, sine of that angle is going to equal, now this is, oh, we forgot about 0. So this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. This is going to be radical 3 over 2. And then cosine is going to be 4, 3, 2, 1. That's going to be 1/2. Okay, so this is just using our shortcuts. Remember, this is the unit circle, so if you don't have this stuff memorized yet, then you can always make your table and count in ascending order with sine and descending order in cosine for your numerator, and you always take the square root of the numerator. Okay, so sine of pi over 3 is radical 3 over 2, and cosine is 1/2. Well, when we multiply by the reciprocal, we get radical 3. So the value is radical 3. Okay, so you're going to do that same sort of thing using those same identities in 17 through 26. All right, but let's take a look at another one here. Let's take a look at the next section. Let's take a look at number 27. Okay, in number 27, we're given two pieces. All right, we're given that sine of 60 degrees. Okay, sine of 60 degrees is equal to radical 3 over 2, which is true. And cosine of 60 degrees is 1/2, which we just did this in the last problem. 60 degrees is pi over 3. All right, now we're asked to find what is tangent of 60, what is cosine of 30, what is sine of 30, and what is cotangent of 60. You might be asking now, wait a minute, why are we changing the angle here? Well, let's make our triangle. We make our right triangle here. Okay, let's actually label. All right, well, if this is going to be Say this angle, since it looks a little bigger, say this is our 60-degree angle. Well, if that's 60 and this is a right triangle, what does that make this angle? Well, that's 180 minus 90 minus 60. Hey, that's 30 degrees. Okay? It's using the sum of all interior angles of a triangle equals 180. Okay, well, if this is 60, we're told that sine of 60 is equal to radical 3 over 2. Well, sine is opposite. This is the opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite side of the 60 is radical 3, and the hypotenuse is 2. Well, cosine of 60 is 1 over 2, and this is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which this confirms the hypotenuse is in fact 2, but this tells us that the adjacent is 1. Well, now that we have our triangle, we can find all of these things. Well, tangent is going to equal, tangent of 60, so we're talking this angle here, is going to equal the opposite over adjacent, which is going to be radical 3 over 1, or radical 3. Another way we can find this is say, well, isn't tangent just the sine of the angle divided by cosine of the angle? And radical 3 over 2 divided by 1/2 is, once again, radical 3. Well, let's look at cotangent of that angle. Well, cotangent is just 1 over tangent of the angle, which in this case is 60. All right, so if tangent of 60 is radical 3, 1 over radical 3 is going to be cotangent, which if we rationalize that, that's radical 3 over 3. So cotangent of 60 is radical 3 over 3. Now, what about sine of 30 and cosine of 30? Well, now we've got to refer to our triangle here and say that, well, sine of 30 is going to be this, which is going to be the opposite, which is 1 over 2, because 1 is opposite to 30, so this is 1/2, and cosine of 30 is equal to radical 3 over 2, because in this case, when we're looking at the 30-degree angle, radical 3 is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Now, what do we notice here? We notice that sine of 30 is equal to 1/2, and cosine of 60 is equal to 1/2, and sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2, and cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2. This is not a coincidence, and hopefully you actually wrote something about this in your notes when filling out the guided notes. But this is actually an identity here in that, and you can also find this on the bottom of page 303. All right, the sine of some angle theta is equal to cosine of 90 minus that angle if we're talking in degrees, or it's equal to cosine of pi over 2 minus that angle. So let's confirm that. So we're saying sine of 60 is equal to cosine of 90 minus 60. Well, what's 90 minus 60? That's 30. So sine of 60 is equal to cosine of 30. Yeah, that's true. And let's look at it another way. Another one of the identities is that cosine of an angle is equal to sine of 90 minus that angle, or sine of pi over 2 minus that angle, depending on if we're degrees or radians. Okay, and so let's check to make sure that works. Cosine of 60 is equal to 1/2, and so that this is telling us that cosine of 60 is going to equal sine of 90 minus 60, which 90 minus 60 is 30. That's also equal to 1/2. And so these are important identities that we need to know, all right, and the difference. And there's actually more to go with that. That cosecant, cotangent, and secant and tangent also work like this. Okay, finally, let's take a look at number 59. Number 59 gives us a triangle, and we have a right triangle here that we're given that this is a 30-degree angle. We're going to call this side x. This is 30. And we want to know, well, what is x? What's this side length? Well, let's look at what we're given. We're given a side here, one of the legs of the triangle, and we're given another leg. Well, we're not given another leg, but we want to find another leg, and we're given an angle. All right, so this has nothing to do with the hypotenuse. We're not given the hypotenuse. We're not trying to find the hypotenuse. So we have to look at which trig which trig function do we want? And so let's look at the SOHCAHTOA, and which trig function does not use the hypotenuse? Because we don't know what the hypotenuse is. We need one that uses the opposite and adjacent, because this is the opposite side and this is the adjacent side. Well, that's tangent. So we know that tangent of 30 is going to equal 30 over x. And so x will equal 30 divided by the tangent of 30, which we know that the tangent of 30 is, well, we can look at our table, the tangent of 30 is actually radical 3 over 3. And so if we simplify this, we get 30 radical 3. Okay, so continue to work the rest of the assignment on page 308, 17 to 30, and 59 to 66.